everyone, and welcome to Influential Women. Here we empower, connect, and inspire women who are leading, creating, and redefining what is possible. I'm your host, Jodie O'Brien, and today we're joined by Tracy O'Malley. She's a performance coach, a speaker, an Enneagram expert who helps entrepreneurs, executives, and leadership teams better understand the patterns driving how they lead, how they communicate, and of course, how they grow. What makes Tracy's work, though, so unique is her ability to connect self-awareness with business performance. Through her coaching and consulting, she helps leaders identify the internal habits, fears, and blind spots that often sit right beneath burnout, conflict, and stalled growth. In a business world focused on external success, Tracy challenges leaders to do the inner work that creates stronger teams, healthier cultures, and more sustainable leadership. This is a conversation about leadership, emotional intelligence, and what it really takes to grow both professionally and personally. Tracy, I'm so glad to have you. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Honored to be here, Jodie. I love a fellow O apostrophe girl too. Love it.
Absolutely. I'm sure that we have similar personality traits as well. So I can't wait to learn more about that.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about operating from design instead of default. So what was the defining moment in your own life when you realized that you were living on autopilot? And then how did you begin rewriting that pattern?
I've kind of sensed it at 28. I was a very young mother and a young wife. And, I grew up in a very passionate Irish family, amazing and exciting and also super dysfunctional. And I always knew, when I was younger, that like my biggest fear in life was kind of messing up my kids long before they were even on my radar. And although my family is amazing, I could see very clearly a lot of the dysfunction, how it repeated, even within myself, things that I did not want to repeat. Lo and behold, I was. If you don't repair it, you repeat it, or it gets repeated, or both. And I really thought I could just move 3,000 miles away from that and just set up shop here in Arizona, which is where I live now. I grew up in Chicago in the Midwest. And when I was 28 years old, as again, a young wife, mother of 2 kids, 2 dogs, the house, the mortgage by the age of 27 years old. And all of a sudden, when my kids turned 3 and 4, I realized that I couldn't outrun, outwit, and outlast kind of that conditioning. And so I took it upon myself to kind of dig a little deeper. Now, this was back in, the year 1999, before everything was at our fingertips and personal development was actually something that people talked about, right? I come from the era of what happens in our house stays in our house. And, if you're seeing a therapist, you don't tell anybody because they're going to think you lost your freaking mind and things like that. So it was kind of like this solo journey, this excavation process. And for the next 12 years, I had some realizations, but because it wasn't talked about and because I didn't have that support network to talk to about it, it would be like 8 steps forward, 7 back, 8 forward, 7 back. And it got really frustrating until I hit 40 years old. And, it was kind of like the perfect storm of shit show, to be honest with you, with, a marriage falling apart, a recession, hitting us between the eyeballs, teenagers looming. Turning 40 is just a whole new process in of itself. And all at once, I was faced with this decision. I'm whacked into the fork in the road. And it's do I take the path I've always known, even though I don't love what produces that, but at least I know what to expect? Or do I blindly go down this path that nobody has ever taught, told, and modeled me? And I know I have a big risk of losing the people, places, and things that are in my life currently to go with what I knew I had in me. But again, no modeling or anything. In fact, if I was to go down that road, I would be mocked, I would be misunderstood, misjudged, and all the things. And so at the age of 40, I decided to go down the road that was unblazed for me by anybody that I had known, and took it upon myself to kind of bring my life to ground zero, because I did not want repeated a lot of the stuff that, I was repeating and was hurtful and not great. And that's what I did. That was kind of the defining moment. But I am definitely a firm believer, if it wasn't like this huge accumulation of the perfect storm that I probably wouldn't have been humbled enough to say, like, I am willing to do whatever it takes to do this.
Incredible. I think it's so interesting how we do. I moved as well, 3,000 miles away, thinking, okay, new life from
Mhm.
the East Coast to the Midwest. Chill. Let's chill it out over here. But I think it's really interesting that we think that these personality frameworks that we explore, that sometimes we can figure out maybe and be self-aware enough to figure out what those things are, good, bad, ugly. But there is a different thing, right? Than figuring out what it is and then actually changing. So why do you think so many of us are okay getting to that point of figuring out, becoming self-aware, but then the changing is such an issue for us?
Jody, I remember when I was a kid, I saw a therapist pretty early on because I questioned everything. I was like, I don't, why is it this way? And it was like, do as I say, not as I do kind of stuff. But I was always challenging it because, like, intuitively, I needed to understand because I'm feeling something different than what I'm seeing. And I think that every therapist, I've seen 9 in my life, they all were like, gosh, you have such insight. You have this divine knowing. Like, how do you know this at this age? And I prided myself on understanding, right? And I think that is the big ol' asterisk on personal development here is, from the neck up, we can understand and have insight all day long. However, if we don't integrate this and take new action, like, understanding is just leaving you neck down dead a lot of the time. And in fact, it was way easier not having awareness because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then if you're not doing something about it, acknowledging kind of the roots of this and yanking things up by the roots and then taking, contrary effective action, you actually end up in a shame spiral, right? Because you know better, but you're not doing better. Or you do things like I did and find things to numb yourself out a little bit. So, like, I always encourage people, like, the self-awareness is the key to unlocking it. And, like, you better be willing to do what it takes to take that self-awareness into acknowledgement and action to create and accelerate any kind of transformation in your life and any strategy. A lot of times, especially in our professional lives, like, I just need more strategy. I just need more strategy. I just need more awareness. I need more awareness. Well, like, yeah, that's like a big old clutter in your brain. And if you don't move that, flow it through the acknowledgement and the action, you pretty much have 10,000 tabs open in your brain and in your spirit, and you're going to block every kind of blessing and abundance and joy and everything. So, the key to this self awareness and these kind of understanding yourself at a deeper level, it's like, okay, are you going to look in the mirror and understand that it's going to require something different of you than maybe you're comfortable with? And, at 28 versus 40, like, I was not ready at 28. I had the awareness, right? And I could move the needle a little bit, but it wasn't until I was full blown, like, I will do what I need to do. As uncomfortable, as unknown as all of this is, I'm aware. I'm aware it's time to acknowledge and take some different action, you know?
Mm. So, what Enneagram patterns tend to show up most often, do you think, in leaders who they look successful externally? We see them, they're on a pedestal, but are struggling internally.
I think the behaviors might look the same, but the motive is completely different, right? So I think, like, the hypervigilance is probably, especially in entrepreneurial land, this lone wolf syndrome. I'm definitely one of those, like, I'll just do it myself and being hypervigilant. There can be, you can see those behaviors, but the guts of why that is can be completely different. It's like, I can be hyper vigilant, but it's not because I want anybody to acknowledge me or care what anybody thinks about me. Mine is rooted in independence, autonomy, and control. But I usually see those, or even procrastination. But even my procrastination, when other people see it, they're like, "Oh my god, that's so cool." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I know the reason behind that. It may look like I'm being, like, self-honoring and resting. This is me completely putting my head in the sand, and because I understand the root of that." And that's why I like these cookie cutter strategies to kind of avoid some of these things. It's very unique depending on where your roots are. right? Because if it's just like the health and wellness industry, like, okay, yeah, I want to lose 20 pounds, but if I don't understand why I keep those 20 pounds on, like I can maybe move the needle, but it's going to end up back where it was, right? And we have to be willing to get to the heart of why, the why behind the behaviors, the why. And that's confronting.
That's so good, though. Your story includes stories of addiction, sobriety, motherhood, and rebuilding your identity. So, how did all of those experiences really reshape your understanding of strength and of leadership?
I mean, listen, I'm like 100% Irish. I was born to drink and fight. And also, like my Enneagram type, my human design, all the things that I understand about myself really feed into that, right? Powerful, intense, all the things. And the same things that are my superpowers, which are my intensity, my fierce, kind of scrappy, tenacious energy, those are my superpowers. They're also the kryptonite in my life. And that's same for all of us, right? Whatever your superpowers are can only be your superpowers when we're operating from this place of love, compassion, empathy, service, grace, fun, and innocence. And absolutely, when I am in that space, I'm unstoppable. I'm fierce. I'm loyal. I'm protective. I'm all those things. Those same things almost wiped out the very thing that I care about more than anything, which is my own children, when I was in a place of fear, insecurity, unworthiness, shame, guilt, or ego. And so the come from is what was really important. And although a lot of times people will champion us when we're in the kryptonite part of our lives because maybe it's something they wish they had more of, this radical, compassionate honesty with ourself is kind of where we can acknowledge the come from. And at the age of 40, I was confronted with all of those things. And I knew on paper and the circle I was hanging with, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know how you do it. Like you've been through so much. You're a warrior." And I'm like, My ego is like, "Yeah, you know it." My soul was like, "Girl, you're full of crap. You're full of crap. And if you really believe that, you're going to have this repeated in your kid's life." And so it was kind of this reckoning moment. Again, just turned 40, the recession, divorce. And then in the middle of all of that, my dad got a 12-day cancer diagnosis and was gone, like literally from diagnosis to death in 12 days. And he's probably the most influential person in my life, the person I valued the most in my life, and also the most dysfunctional person in my life. And I had this kind of realization that life really is too short. That's a cruel joke. And in a moment, things can change. And in a moment, I can decide to change. And I did. And everybody in my life thought I was crazy. They're like, "You're not that bad. Gosh, I'm worse than you." And that's a clear sign. If you have people in your life, when you tell them you're going to make this big, huge change and you're committed to it, and they're like uncomfortable with it or they're trying to talk you out of it, it's time to move on. And so I did. And I checked myself into rehab when everybody around me thought I was crazy. I sat my kids down. They were 14 and 15 at the time. And I was like, "Listen, guys, like you guys know the real. You know I'm amazing. And also, I want to know the way, go the way, and show the way in a way that I have not seen before, that I know will benefit you guys for the long haul. And when I get back, I promise you things are going to be different." That default versus design. It's the same thing as superpowers and kryptonite, right? It's only by design when it's the superpower. Default when we're in defense and protection and avoidance and all the things. And so I checked myself into rehab and I went away for 30 days and was brought to my knees and resisted. I was like wrangling a bull, not because of the drinking, but because of the confronting myself by looking in the mirror and being compassionately, radically honest with myself. The alcohol was the easy thing to give away. The fighting with myself and fighting with anything that tried to challenge me, that was a whole nother ball game. But here I am almost 14 years later. I will have 5,000 days of continuous sobriety next week, which is insane. And the trajectory of not only my life, but my lineage has changed. And it's the best decision I've ever made. And I'll tell you this, I am way scrappier of a fighter and way more powerful than I ever was, swinging my fists and swinging my ego around and swinging the Irish car bomb shots. So,
Mhm.
you know, so if you had told me that that would be the path I would take, I would have laughed at you and I would have bet big, huge money that that wouldn't be the case. It was the best decision I ever made, not just for my health and my wellness, but my lineage moving forward.
Mm, so empowering and so powerful. Your dad must be incredibly proud of you. 5,000 days. That's crazy accomplishment.
Tell me about
Congratulations.
it. It's the best decision I've ever made. I don't miss it. There are days it's like, God, I wish I could just take the edge off, but I have healthier ways now, and my entire family was like, "What in the world?" I'm like,
Mhm.
"I know." Because sometimes when we step into our light, it's like putting a mirror in front of people that they're not willing to look at. And I've always kind of had that energy. I've always kind of been this truth teller and truth seeker my whole life. And when I do stand in any kind of truth, it does make people uncomfortable. And I used to like feel sad about that because I'd get projected upon or people would do the mass exit out of my life. I was like, what's wrong with me? Right. And now I understand that that's part of the calling. That is part of the calling because I have to do that with myself every day. I have to look in that mirror that sometimes is blinding some days and believe the light. It's way easier to believe the dark. But it's been a really cool journey. And my kids, they're almost 30 now, both of them. And I can't even imagine not just what our life would look like. Obviously, that opened up a whole new floodgate of abundance and joy and health and vitality and just all the good things opened up when I made that decision and went down that path that was not blazed before me. But the relationships that I have with them and also the relationships that they create because of that decision, healthier, stronger, non-negotiable boundaries in their life, self-honoring practices that it took me 40 years to figure out. They figured it out in their teens because of my one decision and because I was modeling that, you know?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, how do you balance that radical honesty? Because you really kind of claim that you're a no BS kind of person with a whole lot of heart. But how do you balance the radical honesty with compassion when you're coaching someone through an uncomfortable truth?
It's really easy to do that for other people. I mean, honestly, like the radical compassionate honesty when I am, slinging it to I was coaching a couple yesterday and I was like, "Okay, you guys buckle up. There's going to be some tough real love for you because you need it and you're ready for it." And that compassion is easy to give because I don't judge anybody anymore. I really, really don't. Even people that really piss me off, I'm like, "Ooh, here's an opportunity for me to learn." And I don't judge them for it because if we judge it or, criticize or have whatever thoughts, we're blocking something of our own, you know. But it's way harder to do for ourselves. That compassion does not always come easy for myself. And, part of that is like it's weakness if I'm doing that. Am I letting myself off the hook? And that's just bullshit. It really, really is. So it's not always easy to do for ourselves, but it also takes practice. Those were not muscles that I had been flexing for a lot of my life. And muscle memory is no joke, right? And I mean, the Irish we're sarcastic and give backhanded compliments. It's a love language of my Irish family. And even though we can understand that it was a joke, especially I was 4 years old the first time I really had some of those take root. When you think about the ages in which you hear some of these things, whether it's the stuff we say to ourselves or the things that are said to us, like they take on a life of their own and really unraveling some of the things that I would like let slide or like, ha ha ha, that's just the way they are. It's like, wait a second. Wait a second. And so not only am I unlearning that from what was said to me, but also the stuff that I was repeating to myself. And you got to put the reps in. The reps build the confidence. The reps change the actions. They accelerate the transformation. I have not got that one mastered for myself. And the older I get, honestly, some days it's like I should know better or I should be wiser than this. And the way that I really balance that and keep it fully in check is I have a picture of myself when I was 4 years old, which is the first age I truly remember the self-abandonment and the chameleon behavior to kind of understand where my place was in all of this. And I remember that a lot of this stuff started with her at that age, and I would never another.
Mhm.
And so it's a lot easier to have compassion for myself when I think about that strong, tenacious little girl who survived a lot versus the 54-year-old one looking in the mirror sometimes. It's like, wait a second, like we're a team here. And I can't just beat myself up because if I do that, I'm beating her up too. And we all know that beating the crap out of a 4-year-old emotionally, spiritually, verbally, serves zero good.
Mhm.
Zero
It's
good.
it's an amazing lesson to have as therapists do, give us that connection where we can see that little girl and have compassion for her and love for her that we could give an identical looking child that's not us. Why can't we give it to her, you know?
Well, that's
So
the ironic part is the reason that I started my excavation process at the age of 27, 28 is because my own daughter, who looked just like me,
yeah.
had turned 4, and all of a sudden it all came back to me. That rage, that like, "Oh my gosh." And so it's been a full circle moment. So when it is tougher to have that radical, compassionate honesty, I think of my little girl that I birthed, the little girl that's still inside of me, and move forward. Because I think a lot of us do okay with the radical honesty. It's the radical, compassionate honesty that takes some practice, especially if you've been through the ringer a little bit.
Well, and you've coached people that have been leaders at major companies like Google, Amazon, YouTube. So, what is one leadership lesson that you would say applies just as much in the kitchen as it would in the boardroom?
Yeah, that understanding that your perspective and what you believe and what motivates you is only 1/9 of the puzzle. And if you want to raise your hand and be the best version of yourself in your home team or your pro team, you're going to have to be open to the other 8 perspectives and ways in which other people are motivated, right? A, because interpersonally, that is stronger leadership. And B, there's something for you to learn there, right? And my kind of realization 14 years ago when I went into the deep dive was like, holy moly, I did not even realize that I kind of believed and only knew my perspective and my motivations. And I was raising 2 beautiful kids that not only were very different from me, they were different from each other. And I was only speaking my one language and my one perspective. And no matter how well intended I was as a leader of my home, and I've been a single mom for 18 years, no matter how well intended I was, because I wasn't open or aware enough of the other ways in which all sorts of people kind of operate, I was creating disconnect within my own kids. And at the ages that they were, like that was going to create a divide and they're going to go out and seek that somewhere else. And that same kind of practice applies into leadership teams. And we always, no matter what your rank is, your title, it doesn't freaking matter. We have people in our lives that are here to teach us something. And it's with that humble openness. It doesn't mean that like I'm any less powerful because I have a humble openness to learn from somebody else, right? And something to learn from somebody. And so it's like, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? That is probably the number one thing to ask yourself in all types of leadership, home and pro team, right? Like I know that I'm right with some of the ways that I think or want to take action, but is it effective? Am Is this really gonna move the needle for this person that I'm trying to grow into a leadership person, this child I'm raising to be a great human, right? Is the way that I'm communicating, no matter how well intended I am, is it effective? And if not, what do I need to learn and how do I need to reframe this or communicate this in a way that can actually create understanding and a cohesiveness to, move the train forward. It's a huge one. It's a
That
huge
is
one.
so good. I mean, just sit in that and digest that. That's crazy good. So, what do you think actually changes when a leader understands the deeper motivations behind behavior? So, not looking inwardly, but looking outwardly.
Yeah, they quit judging people so damn much, myself included. Like, I used to, like, think people were lazy or not as strong, including my own kids. Like, and that was kind of, like, very convicting for me. It's like, wow, like, I'm low key judging both my kids. And, like, how did they come from me? Like, I've got this one that's super sensitive and an empath, and I got this one that's like this free spirited visionary. And I'm like this tenacious, tactical, like, warrior. And I was judging them, and not verbally to their faces, but energetically. I was like, what in the world? How do you guys even function? And, like, why do you care what people think? And honestly, like, they both have beautiful divine gifts in those things that I lacked. And the minute I understood that, I could speak to understanding of that. It doesn't mean that that's my order of operations ever. However, because I understood that, and this goes for, like, working interpersonally, professionally too. Like, I was like, I can work with type A, let's go kind of people, but I left all the empaths in my dust. I left the people that were natural connectors feeling like crap. That's not effective, right? Same thing in my home. And the moment I sought to understand what was at the heart of every person that's in front of me, the boardrooms of Google, the boardroom of my home, the boardroom of my, romantic partnership, the more that I seek to understand their perspective, it's an unstoppable, bulletproof kind of team. And people feel empowered. They gain confidence. They work harder. They don't slip into their coping mechanisms, and you just make everybody around you better, and you grow yourself at the same time. Now, because of that, not only awareness, but then taking action to seek to understand and speak differently and with intent and pure integrity, I have grown tenfold and am able to lead the empaths of the world without leaving them in tears, right? I can give them the tough love because they know that I deeply understand them, and they'll take that tough love not as judgment, but as, like, she wants what's best for me and she believes in me, right?
Mm.
And same thing for the tough girls like me or the tough guys like me. It's like, I see where this bravado is coming from. And it's time for me to put you into tears for a little bit in a good way. I've brought many a men in a boardroom to tears, and not.
Mm. You often talk about legacy. When people who know Tracy O'Malley think about you 30 years from now, what do you hope that they say changed because you were here, because you were there in that boardroom?
She loved me enough and cared about me enough to say the things nobody else would say to me, that were the things that I needed to hear, that would grow me and change the very thing that I sought to change my entire life. Honestly, like, they call me the velvet hammer, and that rings true. It's like, yeah, I might crack you over the head with some hard things, but it's cloaked in so much love for you. Whether, it's a client, like, I love deeply, I love fiercely. And I think that's what I would hope, whether it's my kids or clients or friends. A friend and former client just shared something. We worked together probably over the last 5 years, and she had just turned 40, and, she was talking about, she's a Midwest girl too. She's like, well, when I retire, I'm going to move to Florida. I'm like, why when you retire? What is it you're afraid of now? What is it you're afraid of now? And she would tell me. I'm like, great. Now we're going to face those things. We're going to say these things. We're going to do it. So you don't have to wait till you're 60 to do it. And she moved there the next year, and she did the thing, and she quit drinking. And that wasn't even on her bingo card, but she's like, well, let me see what this does. And, it's things like that, even long after our work together is done, like, that is always at the forefront of her mind. And it's exactly what I said. It was kind of that velvet hammer kind of energy and guidance in somebody's life.
I love that. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today. This conversation, I mean, it was so powerful, and there's so many nuggets that we can take away from you. Just that reminder that leadership starts with self awareness, and that understanding ourselves better can completely transform the way that we lead, communicate, grow, and parent our children who are on the other side of this door. We are so grateful for your insights, your honesty, and the work that you're doing to help leaders build healthier businesses and more intentional lives. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe Leave us a review or share it with a woman who's building something innovative, leading in technical fields, or fighting for women's health and agency. Every single story strengthens the visibility of women's leadership and the impact that we have everywhere. So until next time, I'm Jodie O'Brien, and this was Influential Women. Keep showing up, keep innovating, and keep building solutions that matter.